title of this talk today is called JavaScript Architecture of the 23rd Century. Who am I? My name is Jonathan Creamer. This is me and my little family. My wife's here in the front row. Say hi to her when you leave. And that's my little daughter, Hadley. She is 10 months old now. We live up in Nashville, Tennessee, where I'm a... how many Nashville people we got? Cool. I'm currently a senior front-end engineer at Lonely Planet. If you don't know who Lonely Planet is, we make travel guides. Been doing it about 40 years. And we're basically in the process of taking all that awesome travel content and putting it out on the digital world. Print kind of sucks these days. Digital for the win. I also worked at Apentu with Elijah Manor, who's also here. Back in the day, that was really fun. JavaScript is my main passion. I've done a lot of server stuff with .NET, Ruby, Cold Fusion even, back in the day, about 5 years ago. But JavaScript is definitely what I am most passionate about. I'm an IE MVP, which just means JavaScript. I don't know why. I think it's because program groups, it has to be Internet Explorer. It's kind of embarrassing sometimes, to be honest with you. I'm an IE MVP. I'm also a Telerik developer expert, so I talk about Kendo UI sometimes, I guess. So that's me. What are we going to talk about today, though? So my agenda today is to kind of talk about a little bit of the history of JavaScript, just briefly. Kind of some of the reasons why we need better patterns and architecture to work with. So I'll kind of go through that and then talk about a few patterns, talk about some module systems like AMD, CommonJS. And then we're going to go way into the future. That's why the title of this talk is 23rd Century. It's a lot of Star Trek references, so if you got any Trekkies in the room, you should really enjoy that. Yeah, the idea is we're going to talk about the stuff of the future that you've probably heard about. How many people have know of ES6, what it is? How many people get to use it in production yet? So nobody. That's awesome. Wouldn't know it's just really good actually, because I'm going to tell you how you can do it and do it really easily and still work in older browsers. It's kind of a miracle. So if you have a laptop and you want to see my slides, bit.ly/cob-js-23. You can kind of sort of follow along. So a little bit of history. I believe it's important to know, just like this quote says, that if you don't know the past, you're condemned to repeat it. So let's just say early in the 22nd century, JavaScript was used as just a flashy rollover image. Who's made a rollover image back in the day? That was like the very basic hello world thing in JavaScript. That was all it was, right? Just move things around the page, be flashy, DHTML. I had a JavaScript for Dummies book, taught you all that stuff. Really crazy stuff. There were just functions everywhere, just so many functions. The globals are stored on the window. That's a terrible thing. You'd end up with huge files, thousands of lines of code. That's a terrible thing. Not to mention browser issues. So these are some of the things we're going to kind of go over here. So you may or may not know this, but if you say var utils equals an empty object in a JavaScript file, essentially what you've done is said window.utils equals, just by default. It's just how JavaScript is. It's kind of silly, but I guess it works. Brendan and I had a week to create JavaScript, and that's probably why it has a lot of weird things like this. So you're kind of dependent upon the ideas of global variables. That's really dangerous stuff because you can easily run into naming convention or naming conflicts with other libraries, particularly, in the real world. If you're dealing with production websites, you're probably going to have third-party vendors that have JavaScript. And if I use var utils, that's a pretty common thing. Somebody else could also use var utils, and then you've blown your stuff up. If I import a third-party library, that actually happened to me in production. It was terrible. We had a car inventory website, 2,000 vendors on this thing, and we used var s for our site ID, which was a terrible thing to do. So don't blame me. That was somebody before me did that. I'd do that. But one of our third-party vendors also used var s because they minified the JavaScript, and hundreds of our inventories just stopped working, and we had 2,000 websites. It was only because of this global variables concept. It's a terrible thing. So you have to be very, very careful. Part of the other problem with globals is that the only way to kind of have two modules communicate, which is kind of what architecture is all about, is by relying on globals. So if I have a JavaScript file called ships.js, and in my main.js I want to use it, well, I'm basically just relying on the fact that when I say starship equals, that I really have window.starship. And so in my main, I have access to that constructor function. So that's kind of a bad practice to basically allow your modules to communicate via globals. It can be really frustrating to debug, too. You might kind of want to punch your computer a little bit. trying to figure out, why this stuff isn't working. It took me like a couple days to figure out that var s thing, by the way. So yeah, it's terrible, terrible. So that function overload back in the day, again, we had functions, just function, with lots of spaghetti code, frustrating to debug. There's no concept of separation of concerns in your code. So people just had, function after function after function, and it just got really, really ridiculous. So yeah, it's really bad to just, you want to just have some sort of organization to your code and not just put functions everywhere, flying all over the place. So another tough thing to deal with is just this thousands of lines of code in a JavaScript file. Man, that's the worst. I dealt with a client that had, like all these different things going on their website, like 5 JavaScript files, but each one of them was like 20,000 lines of code long. And I was like, oh my God, this is so terrible. I'm like scrolling and scrolling, finding things. It's awful to do. And it's just kind of a code smell, really. It just says that you need to figure out better ways of separating your code. If you have these long, huge files, even down to like huge, long functions, that's a code smell that says, I should probably figure out a way to separate this logic out into something that makes more sense and it's more easy to reuse. So something is wrong. So all those things made JavaScript unmaintainable for the long term. It's hard to find things. You end up writing coupled code. It's super hard to unit test. And yeah, if we're going to survive a 5 to 7 year mission into deep space, we had to change things here. So what do I mean by deep space? Well, web applications have gotten huge, right? It's no longer just moving things around on the page. We're building entire, apps with nothing but JavaScript code. So you may have thousands of lines of code spread throughout multiple files. You're doing Gmail, you're doing, Twitter for a while, with all these different single-page applications. My role, though, is always to bet on JavaScript. There's ways to fix these problems, get around these problems. And single-page applications are kind of, the wave of the future here. We just need some ways to organize our code better. So one way is with a constructor pattern, which sounds very basic, and it kind of is. It's been built into the language for a while. But it's kind of this OO-ish type JavaScript thing. So I know we have a lot of .NET people here. That's kind of like a class almost. It's not a class, but it's kind of like a class in that you can new it up and create instances of it. But by separating, just kind of the OO paradigms out, you can have your logic separated into multiple different files. So it's a lot easier to work with and maintain. So to create a constructor function in JavaScript, this is a constructor. I don't know if you realize that, but this is what a constructor function looks like. It's just the idea that you have an object you need to create, and you just set it equal to a function. And then every single constructor function you declare gets this idea of a prototype on it. And I think that word, for some reason, just blows people's minds. I've seen so many talks and hundreds of blog posts and books written upon the idea of this prototype thing. But at its core, the prototype is just another object. And that's literally all it is. And it just stores methods. Okay? And then every time that I create a new ship, my ship has those methods. My instance of that ship has those methods on it. That's at its core what it is. But for some reason, that prototype word really confuses people. So yeah, you can create a starship and create instances of that thing just by using that new operator on it. So then in another file, so I say that one was starship, now I can have another file for my torpedo launcher and put it into its own logical file place, like literally in the file system. And then also mentally, I've got these two ideas separated so they're easier to unit test, it's more maintainable, there's less code to fish through, it's easier to find things. And then again, I can create a constructor, I can set some methods up on it, and then I'll go back to this. So I'm relying on globals right now, which kind of sucks. We'll get past that. But so now I can just use my torpedo launcher inside my starship file. Right? So you've got these things nicely separated out. And the other thing you get when you use constructors is inheritance, which we love as .NET developers. It's a great thing. It allows you to share behavior. You can create multiple different types of starships based upon one starship constructor. It's just the typical object-oriented paradigms. And you can actually do that in JavaScript. It's a little weird, no doubt, but you can do it. So this is what inheritance in JavaScript looks like. So I can basically declare a new constructor function called constitution class. And then I can do this little weird thing here where I say starship.apply, and then I can send it the arguments that get passed into this constitution class function. That apply thing is just something built into JavaScript. If you haven't ever seen that before, it just basically invokes the method, and you can basically change the context and pass in arguments. And there's apply and call. So if you don't know what those are, just Google function apply MDN, because Mozilla Developer Network will be your good source for that. So basically what I've done just in this line is when I say new constitution class, I'm going to wind up also calling my starship class constructor function. So that way that's kind of like the super method. Then this is the part that every single time you want to do this, you're going to have to Google this part because it's super weird and dumb looking. So yeah, it's really weird. So I can declare methods on my prototype. Actually, I just realized that this would actually overwrite it. But anyway, I can declare methods on my constitution class prototype. And then if I want to grab all the other methods for my starship, I have to say constitution class.prototype equals object.create starship.prototype. And that basically just like copies the methods from my starship over to my constitution class. And then because the constructor method is a part of that prototype, I also have to reset the prototype as well. So you can see why there's lots of blog posts written about this. This is very confusing. And it's like, LOL, what? I don't understand that. That's weird. So yeah, we'll get to some better ways of dealing with this in a minute as well. So another pattern that is really helpful in kind of architecting your code, once you've got all these constructor functions flying all over the place, is you can use this idea of namespaces, which is, if they're not real namespaces, but to sort of to help with that global problem. This is really common if you're not able to use like AMD or CommonJS. So what you would do is you'd set up like a NS object, and you just say if it's already defined, you grab it, or not create another object. And then I can have lots of other different namespaces inside of it. So I can have a namespace for my ships and for my owners. And then I can just declare functions inside of those namespaces. So now rather than having globals for Starship, globals for Constitution class, all these things, they're all grouped into one namespace. So that way you can access them really easily. And then also you can just you can trace that object and see everything that you have in your domain, your problem domain. So all your constructors, all your variables, everything can be in that namespace. So we're getting there. This is better, but there's still a long way to go here with this problem because we still have a few other issues. The biggest caveat of all these of that to me is that you have to kind of organize your code with script tags, right? So I'd have to have my main first because it's the thing that, well, actually that would be out of order. I need to rearrange that. Starship and Constitution class have to be in order because the Constitution class is dependent upon the Starship, right? So I've already screwed this up already because that main needs to be the third thing and not the first thing. So yeah, I'm saying it's like, woo. So yeah, organizing with script tags is just like terrible. So some other issues that you've got in there. The inheritance, again, is just messy. It's hard to remember, and it's just like, what? So in dependency management, it's terrible with those script tags. It's very bug prone, hard to maintain, once again. We need some other type of mechanism to fetch our modules for us so that we're not just using script tags all over the place. I mean, we're still always going to have script tags because we're front-end developers. It's going to have to happen, but there's new cool things that we can do to not worry about that. And we need something that helps manage our dependency chain better. So we don't have to worry about the order of those script tags. You know, if my Constitution class needs a Starship, I just need like a better way to organize that dependency chain. So that's kind of where modules comes into play. So the first module system that kind of arose, the most popular one probably is called CommonJS. So a group of folks got together and decided that it was time to have a module specification for JavaScript. So how many people do Node.js development? So yeah, about a quarter of the room. That's awesome. So you may or may not know it, but the type of JavaScript you're writing when you write with Node is based upon the CommonJS specification. So those guys all got together and they said, these are the things we need. Let's make this thing happen. So it's a really, really good thing there are no globals. There is a global thing you can do, but you should never do it. But generally inside of a file, you're not going to have globals. If you say var utils, it's going to be scoped with inside of that module. And it's a hell of a lot easier to manage dependencies in it as well, because you're not dealing with script tags. So with the CommonJS module, this is kind of similar code here. If this was my constitution class now written as CommonJS, I would say var starship equals require, and I would just go grab that starship. So I wouldn't have to have this idea of like script tags to order those dependencies for me. I can just go get it myself. And then I can declare my constitution class. I can do all that crazy inheritance stuff. And then I can export it so that the API of this module is my starship, or my constitution class, rather. I need to flip that around. All right, so that's what a CommonJS module looks like. So in my index.js, I can require my constitution class. I can create an instance of my constitution class, and then export some other things. So it's actually very simple, but really, really nice to have that. The only problem that we have here is that some people who are working in the CommonJS spec realize, like, okay, CommonJS, if you look at this, this is kind of a synchronous operation. This implies that I get my constitution class immediately when I ask for it. Well, in the browser, that doesn't work so well, does it? Because everything in the browser is asynchronous. So we have to know like when that thing is done being loaded so that we can then continue to work with it. So a couple people broke off and created what's called as AMD, the asynchronous module definition. So it looks a little bit like CommonJS, but CommonJS was meant to be synchronous, whereas this one will work asynchronously in the browser. There's a lot of different implementations, but probably the one you've heard of and the most popular is require.js. So how many people use require? Yeah, see, that's awesome. I use require for a whole lot of my career, and it's a really, really great framework. So when you're using require, you use this define function, which is a global, by the way, but it's nicely encapsulated, right? So it's like, as long as nobody overrides define, you're okay. But yeah, so you use define, and you create a module like per file. So I'd have, again, the starship.js, the constitution class.js. You'd have one logical module per file. So you're nicely separating your code out. And then just like CommonJS, you use the require to fetch things. So, and the module name is also inferred from the file name with require.js. So this is what a require.js module looks like. You can see that I'm using define, and I'm passing a function in here, and that's what they call the factory function. And I can say var starship, and again, since this is inside of a function here, this starship, so no globals are being created. Require.js will read this thing and create this module for you, and there will be no globals. No ifs necessary. This kind of looks like, if you've ever heard of the revealing module pattern, it's kind of a similar concept here, where we can have all this like little private memory in here, and whatever I export out here is what my module's API is, right? So I can declare, on the previous one, I'm actually exporting an entire constructor function, but if I want, I could also just return an object with some functions on it. So that's really nice too. There's lots of options about how you export things. So I could have a torpedo launcher, and I can actually, this is almost like a private variable right here, because nobody can touch that shots remaining. It's just kind of in its own little block of memory inside of my factory function, so it's almost like a private, even though there's no such thing as that in JavaScript. So with dependencies with require, require.js is, even though this is kind of crazy, this will blow your mind a little bit. This looks like the asynchronous operation, or the synchronous operation of CommonJS. But what James Burke cleverly did is that when this module is defined, it parses out the string in here and finds out that I've actually asked for some sort of dependency, and automatically resolves it, even though it looks synchronous, but it still is actually asynchronous. So this is really, really cool, because at this point now, the code inside of this module basically is just a CommonJS module. So you can actually share code between CommonJS and AMD just by wrapping it with this define thing. So that's a cool benefit of using requires implementation of AMD. So again, this is just the same constitution class implemented with require.js. So this is all well and good, I really like require. If you're using it, keep using it. It's super awesome. But there are just a few other things that I would say are kind of a little bit. First of all, it takes a little bit of a learning curve to kind of understand what you're dealing with. It requires its own special syntax. There's several different implementations of AMD, and it's not really native to the language. It still feels like, as JavaScript developers, there's got to be some sort of native module system. So there's got to be something even better that we can use here. Right? Yeah. Yeah. So how about the 24th century? What is the next generation? Well, ES6 is the next generation, or ES 2015. It's actually called 2015 now. Recently I'll start back here. So ES5 has been around since 2009. And it's been great. We've loved it, except for in IE. But we're getting there. So finally, we started getting some progress. People started creating this thing called Harmony, ES Harmony. It evolved into ES6, and it became this huge bucket of things. And then as early as, I think it was in June, they finally unveiled ES 2015, which basically what they've decided to do is instead of like having ES6, this massive bucket of features, they're actually going to attempt to do like a yearly release cycle. So there'll be an ES 2016 and ES 2017. So it's weird, but they finally released something in June. The spec for ES 2015 was like done-ish. So that's really cool. So there's a lot of new syntax and features. They're really going to help our architecture in JavaScript a lot. So I'm actually going to show you guys two things real quick. We're going to go through a lot of the new syntax for ES6. In case you haven't seen it, looked like about maybe over half of the room hadn't seen it yet. And then we'll jump into classes and modules. So one of my favorite features of ES6 is string interpolation. So how many people have added strings in JavaScript? It's like the worst possible thing you can do. It's so frustrating. Well, now there's this awesome syntax where you use a tick mark here, and then this $ thing, and you have string interpolation. So finally, oh my gosh, like that, I don't know, it's just a silly thing, but it's so awesome. And this even works across new lines. You can have multiple lines in there, and as long as your tick mark is somewhere, you're good to go. So no more building huge HTML strings with plus this, plus this, plus this. Super nice feature. So we have some new scoping things we can deal with now too. So we all know that with var, when you declare var in a function, it doesn't do what you think it does. If you declare it down at the bottom, it's actually hoisted up to the top, which is why we've all been told to always just declare vars at the top of your closest function, because that's really where things get defined. So that's why you have var all the time. Well, with ES 2015 or 6, or I keep calling it ES6. I'm just going to keep calling it ES6. It really confuses me with 2015. With ES6, you have two new things you can use. One is called let, and the other is const. I really don't understand. Const is a little bit of a weird one, so I don't use it a whole lot. But I believe the rule I've been told is that use const when you're wanting to imply, obviously, that something is constant. It'll throw some errors if you try to reassign things. But like on an array, I can still call like functions on it, and that's fine. But if I tried to say messages equals another array, I'd get an error there. But it's still not something I use a whole lot. My default now, rather than var, is let. So I would go let first, or maybe const if you need it, then let, and basically only ever use var if you are implying some sort of backwards compatibility need. But in general, I'd never use it. But what's so cool about it is, look inside, look what I've got going on here. I've got an if block, and I'm declaring a string here called message. And what's crazy about it is if I try to access the message up here, that's what's referred to as the temporal dead zone. So if you want to impress your friends when you go home, you can talk about the temporal dead zone. And message will not be, you'll get an error. It'll be undefined. It'll actually throw an error in ES6. So the message is only available inside of this if block, which is a nice feature. If you're a .NET developer, you're obviously used to this kind of thing. And so it can help eliminate that confusion. So this is another place you can use let. It used to be where if you said var for I equals 0, you'd get a JS hint error that you declared a variable down low. Well, now you can actually use let I equals 0 here. And if you try to access I outside the loop, it's undefined because it's only available for that little block of that for loop, which is really nice. So no more function scope. Yes! That's really awesome. So my other favorite feature, let and const are great features, but my other favorite feature is these arrow functions. I love arrow functions. So this looks a lot like a lambda. So rather than having to type function all the time, it's very terse. I can use this parentheses, little arrow looking dude, some curly braces. And one of the coolest parts about this is if I just want to do like a one-liner, just like log something out when I click on my warp button, I don't even have to have the curly braces on there. It just implicitly returns whatever is in there. So no curly braces either. Then also, how many people have dealt with the binding of this problem in JavaScript? That's something like literally every day that I deal with as a JavaScript developer. And part of the cool part about arrow functions is they like automatically recognize the scope that they're in and automatically bind themselves to the correct this. Because if I used a function here, the this inside of my set timeout would be the window. And I mean, that's just like, what? So it's terrible. So you can declare anonymous functions like this, one-liners, and then this is how you just declare an anonymous function outside of, or just like wherever. Let fn equals, and then there you go. So those are really nice. If you take that and pair it up with default parameters, it's like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. So how many, I mean, like, I've spent so much time creating these like default argument things where I say speed equals speed or this argument equals this or this. Whereas now, if I declare a parameter up here, I'd say speed equals 5, and there you go, I have a default argument in my arrow function. So that's very, very, very nice. I love that feature too. This is kind of a small thing, but it's also very nice to know. If you have a key and a value that have the same name, you don't even have to put them both in there now. You can just say torpedoes and phaser. That's the same thing as torpedoes, torpedoes. So there's a couple just little niceties like that that are really kind of good to know that are in there. Destructuring is another one of my favorite features. So if I have an array here of two things, this is a really weird syntax, but it's pretty sweet. So I can use a square bracket on the left and a square bracket on the right. And what I'm basically doing is I'm declaring variables first and second, and they get assigned to the first and the second arguments, or first and the second positions in the array. So first ends up being humans, second ends up being Klingons. So I'm destructuring that array into variables. So I can do that with arrays. And then another nice feature with destructuring, well, it's not really with destructuring, but so I can use this rest parameter thing now too. This dot, dot, dot is one more dot. It's supposed to be 3 dots. Forgive me for that. This dot, dot, dot rest is actually a thing. So if I want to grab just my humans and I have an array of other races, I can grab all the rest of them with this dot, dot, dot rest parameter. So that's a really nice feature now as well. You can also destructure objects. So if I have an options object that has a bunch of key value pairs on it, and then I am going to grab that options object later, I can basically pull off certain things off of the object and declare them as local variables. I know this one looks really weird. It's because it's like looks like the operations are screwed up, but that's actually the right syntax, believe it or not. So I end up with 3 variables. So captain would be Jean-Luc Picard, first officer William Riker, and my weapons would be this. So object destructuring is one that looks weird at first, but then once you start writing ES6 and you go back, you're like, God, I wish I could destructure things because that would be so much easier. Otherwise, it'd have to be captain equals options dot captain, first officer equals options dot first officer, right? So it's just a kind of a nice clean code type syntax. So my mind is blown by these new features. I hope yours is too. So the next part I want to talk about is adding some class to JavaScript. So this is a class in JavaScript. Believe it or not, that is now a thing. So it's no longer just function Starship. There's actually a class keyword. So I can say class Starship. And we're going to break this whole thing down. This kind of combines a lot of what I just talked about with the syntax. So the first thing you'll notice is there's like no arrow here. and there's no commas or colons. It's just fire, the name of the method, and then the arguments. And what this does is basically starship.prototype.fire equals function, and then the arguments and everything. So it's just a nice, clean syntax for declaring instance methods instead of having to do all that other terse stuff. This gets defined correctly. We have getters and setters now. How awesome is that? So you can say get command, and you can return a string that combines the captain and the first officer. You can have a set for the crew, and basically if you pass in an array of members, it would map over them and create new instances of some kind of crew member class. And then you can return the getter here. And so it would, when you say this.crew equals an array of officers, it would automatically call the setter. Right? I don't know, even though it seems weird that you have to use the parentheses on these, but when you actually call it, you don't do anything like that. It's still not a function. It's the getters and setters for variables. So that's a really, really nice feature of them. So the constructor is the function that fires when you run new. So if you want to have some sort of function that when you say new Constitution class or new Starship, you would use this constructor. And look what I'm doing here. This is all kinds of weird stuff going on here. So I'm actually destructuring in the constructor function with default parameters here. So let's just jump down here. If I say new Starship and I pass it an object, this right here looks like makes sense, right? It's just an object with key value stuff on it. But what I can do in my constructor is I can grab captain off of the options and just say this.captain equals captain. Then I can do the same thing for my first officer because I'm passing in William Riker. Then for my weapon systems, I'm basically, if I don't pass any weapon systems in, I just want to set it to an empty object. And the last one here, I'm not even passing in max warp down here. But because I've got max warp equals 5 in my destructure up here, max warp is set to 5 by default. So that's a really nice combination of all those different types of the destructuring, the default parameters, the constructor, all those things. So really helps clean things up. Now this is even more awesome here. So all that crapiola we had to do before with the starship.apply and the object.create and resetting the prototype, man, that's all gone with these two things, or that one word, extends. So if I have a Galaxy class I want to create, and I have a Starship that I want to base it on, I just say Galaxy class extends Starship. And that's it. Nice, nice, nice inheritance. Then you have access to super. So if you want to call a function on the parent, you can call super.warp and override it, or call it, rather. So man, yeah, ES 2015 classes, that's just awesome stuff. So the next thing I want to talk about is ES6 Modules. So like I said before, how awesome would it be if when we're trying to deal with our JavaScript architecture, if we had some kind of native module system rather than having to get require.js going and figure out all of that stuff, use the RJS minifier. What if we had our own module system? Well, we do, and it's beautiful. So you can declare a class and just export it. And the default keyword here is basically just says that whenever I import my starships, it's going to expose Starship by default. That's all that means. So that's it. That's ES6 modules. This is the actual spec, or 2 spec of it. So I can have a Starship class here, and then in my Galaxy class, I can use this import Starship from, and then the path to the file. And I don't have to use .js or anything like that. And that is native modules. And that is coming. And it is so much easier to use. It's an amazing thing. So you can actually export just a function if you want, or you can export multiple functions. So if I wanted to make like a logger thing and export multiple functions out of here, in something that utilizes this logger, I can use destructuring and import either one or both of those methods from my captain's log. So that's really nice. And that's basically it. And it seems so simple, but man, when you start writing with ES6 modules, you'll like never want to do anything else again. But the problem is, as we all know, this is going to be literally probably IE will implement a lot of this stuff in the 23rd century. So that's why we have this concept of transpiling that is just really awesome right now. So this is kind of, when you have dreams about new JavaScript features, and you remember you have to support IE8. It's like, oh my gosh, I forgot, crap, I can't do that. But thank God for these transpilers that we have these days. We're all used to using now grunt or gulp. Those are standard paradigms in the front-end world these days. So we're kind of used to that deploying paradigm. So things like CoffeeScript and TypeScript and you name it, there's tons of them out there. JS6, another one. We can just kind of add that to our grunt and gulp pipeline and write in these 24th century concepts and use them today. And they work in IE8 even, kind of. It's a little tough, but you can't do it. But IE9 out of the box with a lot of these transpilers just works. And the best one that I've been using lately is called Babel. And yeah, make it so. So I can basically take modern code and make it work wherever. And it's a combination. You can use it just like on the command line, just like npm install -g Babel. There's grunt tasks for it. There's browserify tasks. There's webpack tasks. It's really, really impressive piece of technology. If you go look at the code, they're literally like doing AST parsing and doing all this kind of crazy stuff. But it's super fast and allows you to use all that stuff like right now. And you can actually go to babeljs.io and see kind of how it transpiles. So this is, just an example of some code here. Class Starship, some ES6. This is what it looks like transpiled. It's actually not that bad, believe it or not. So what we get here is we get a function that is kind of an inheriting helper function. And then we have a class checker that I'm not really sure what the heck that does, but it's there. And then you can see that I'm declaring my Starship constructor. I'm declaring my Galaxy class constructor, which inherits the Starship, and then inherits down here, and then varship equals new Starship. So that 4-ish lines of code transpiles to 20 or so. But the cool part about that is it'll work in all your older browsers, and then for the native or for the browsers that will support classes and modules and all that stuff sooner, you don't even have to transpile. And the idea is that in theory, over time, you can just drop the Babel step and your code will just work. I mean, God knows when, but it's still a thing that could happen, and that's exciting, right? I mean, as JavaScript developers, we're so used to being stuck in the past with everything. It's so nice to be able to actually develop modern things like right now. So the pipeline that I use at Lonely Planet, which has just become one of the coolest things to me and why I'm so excited about where I work, is that we're using Webpack. How many people use Webpack? Wow, like 2. Cool, I get to introduce you to this. This is fun. So Webpack it bundles all the things, literally. If you go to their website, you can bundle images, you can bundle CSS, JavaScript, TypeScript, CoffeeScript, ES6, whatever you want. And it combines it all into like just your little sets of bundles for you. So it's kind of like a browserify. It's kind of like, Uglyfy, but it actually is super configurable and allows you to do crazy things you never thought would be possible just with a few lines of configuration. So yeah, it works with CommonJS and AMD actually right out of the box too. So if you're kind of in this position where you want to try Webpack, but all your code is written in AMD, you can still do it, and Webpack actually understands what an AMD module is, or a CommonJS module. So it just works out of the box with that. So it's very, very handy. So yeah, super flexible. Then the idea is that based upon the file extension that you're wanting to bundle, you can have there's tons of different loaders now that people have written. There's like Babel loader, CSS loader, style loader, Sass loader, less loader, file, URL, tons and tons of them. And because Webpack is so easily plug-inable and configurable, they just keep that number just keeps growing by the day. So if anything you need to bundle, TypeScript, CoffeeScript, it's available for you to use pretty much out of the box. Getting started with it is super easy. You just got to globally install Webpack, and then in your project, install the Babel loader. And that's it to get started. I mean, honestly, that's really all you have to do. And then you just have to create a config file. And what's kind of cool is if you really want, you could use Webpack without Grunt or Gulp or anything. You can actually use Webpack basically by itself because there's plugins for uglifying and doing all those things as well. So but this is kind of what a very basic Webpack config looks like. This would get you started with ES6. So to start out with here, I have this concept of entries. And so an entry in an application could be a page. It could be your vendor files, all your jQueries and your Angulars and all that. However you want to logically divide up your app is what your entries are. So to start with here, I just have one, .js/app, and that would be app.js. There's no extension on that. So you can have as many different entry points in your application as you want. So solving the problem of bundling your code across like multi-page apps is way easier with Webpack, and I'll kind of talk more about that in a second. But yeah, so you could have like your home, your about us, contact us, those different entries for each type of logical breakpoint in your app. So the next bit here is describing how you want your code to output. So I have an output key, and inside here I want all my code to output to a dist folder, and then this like square bracket name thing is kind of like a placeholder. So by default, when I run Webpack, based upon this entry, I would have an app.js. And then if I had any other entries, I'd get an entry.js, a blah, 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 blah. There's a couple different placeholders you can use. I end up using name the most, but then you can use like hash. If you want to do some cache busting stuff, you can use the hash or the chunk hash. I think hash is based upon the compilation hash, and then chunk hash, anyway. I will give you a word of caution with Webpack. Some of the naming of things is like kind of almost like Angular, where it's like, what the heck does that mean? But once you break it down, it's generally easy to work with. But like chunk hash, what the heck? Everything gets, anyway, it's weird. But just follow this and you'll be fine. So this is how I would set up a loader. So I have an array of them. And so I'm saying loaders, array, and then an array of objects. And so I'm going to test for JS files. So anytime that I use a CommonJS or an ES6 or an AMD thing and I do a JavaScript file, it's going to pass it through this loader, my Babel loader. And by default, I don't even have to have this stage equals 0, but I'm just kind of illustrating that if you want to add like options to your loaders, they're done with query parameters on here. That's the one thing. I hope they change that at some point, because it's kind of weird, because you end up with like these really long query string things, but it's not that bad. But yeah, so stage equals 0 here for this Babel loader allows me to use like ES 2017 things that they're just like playing with, like array comprehensions, for example, is like not an ES 2015, but if you set your stage equals 0 here on your Babel loader, you can use even that stuff like way far in the future. So yeah, that's how you set up a loader. It's very, very easy. So this would be an example of another type of loader. If I want to compile Sass, I can do that with Webpack. I've got 3 different loaders that help achieve that. The first is the Sass loader, and the Sass loader uses Node Sass under the covers, which Node Sass is a Node version of the Sass, Node implementation of Sass. And it's built on C, so it's like super fast. So you can actually compile your Sass with Webpack and not have to have running multiple processes and things. It all works together. It's a little mind-bending at first, but it's really nice. So I can compile with the Sass loader, and then that pipes its output into the CSS loader, which understands CSS. And then you can actually do a third step, which is passing it into this style loader. And what that does is it will actually compile your CSS, you'll get the CSS, and then it just dynamically inserts script tags at the top of your page. So you get this nice kind of performance boost out of it. There's an amazingly awesome talk by Pete Hunt, who works at Instagram. And if you actually go watch that talk, what you'll realize that Instagram is doing is there's no link rel equal style sheets on their page. And it's nice for them because they're a single page application, but they basically just use Webpack, and if you go inspect their page, there's just all this inline style stuff. So that means no HTTP requests, no latency, no problems there. So you get this like initial page load that's really fast, and then your styles will come in. And for a single page application, it's just awesome. So that's all you have to do configuration-wise, and then you just run Webpack, and that's it. And you'll have it dist and your compiled output. So it's pretty simple to get started with. One of the other big draws of Webpack to me and why I picked it for what we're doing at Lonely Planet is because it's super easy to load only the JavaScript and the CSS that you need for your page because of this whole entries thing and a couple other plugins you can use. One of the problems I've wrestled with throughout my career is figuring out, okay, so I'm not doing a single page application, I'm doing a multi-page application, but I don't want all of my code on every page, right? I'd like to just have, only what I need on my home page, particularly on my home page, because I only want a little bit on my home page so I get that nice fast page load. And then on my about page, I need this JavaScript and this CSS, and on my contact page, I need these things. And you can there's been lots of different, require.js kind of helps with that. There's been lots of different ways of doing it. But with Webpack, it's really, really awesome and works with very little code. So if I have multiple entry points into my application, so if I'm going to have an app that points to my index page, and I'll have a Starfleet page and a captain's log page. So these are three separate, let's think of them as three separate pages in my application. So I can divide those all up logically. I can use plugins. So we've got loaders and plugins. So the loaders takes a file and shoves it through and exports it out. And the plugins can do all kinds of crazy things. There's the one that I'm going to talk about in a second is called CommonJS. But then there's things for doing uglification. There's things for, if you don't like that idea of the inline style sheet, you can use this extract text plugin, and it will generate style sheets for you if you don't like that approach. There's tons more on this list. You can go check them out. The one that I think is the most amazing, though, is this CommonJS plugin. What I can do with this thing is, no matter how many other entries I have, I can do common here and pass it by default just an empty array, but I can start it out. So if I'm doing jQuery and I want knockout and I want all these different libraries, I can start them out in this common array and just give them kind of the module name. And then and then down here in this plugins thing, I new it up and I'm going to call it common. These two things have to line up. So common here needs to be common there. And then this minchunks option says, anytime that a module is used 2 or more times, I want you to export it also into this commons file as well. So I can start out with a common file that includes everything that I need on every page, because you may want jQuery on every page, you may want knockout on every page, whatever. So it's really cool to be able to just specify the things you know for a fact you're going to need on every page. And then the minchunks thing deals with your code, with the things that you know. If I use this module 2 or more times, I want you to take it out. I want Webpack to take it out and put it into this common thing as well. So it's really, really nice. So I'm going to go and jump into showing you what that looks like. Let's see here. Displays. What the? Oh. All right. So this is my demo Webpack config. Everybody in the back see it? We're good? Good? Okay. So it looks like what I showed you guys just a second ago. So I'm going to start out here with a common, and then I've got my 3 entries, and I've got the outputs the same. I'm using the Babel loader in my plugin. So let's go look at this code. So my JS/index is my main entry point here. And you can see at the top that I'm using an import statement, and I'm going to import the logger. So the logger lives up here in my utils directory. So it's just got these 2 functions in here, right? So that's my first entry. Oh, sorry, right there. That's my first entry. And then I'm importing my classes, or my ships, my launchers, doing all this fun ES6 stuff, and then using my logger. Okay, so that's one entry. And then the other one is my captain's log entry. This one's basically if I wanted to have a logging page of some kind. So again, I'm importing my logger in here. So this is the thing where now, since I've used this logger method 2 or more times, my CommonJS plugin is going to realize that that logger has been used in multiple entries. And so it's going to say, okay, cool, it's time to actually take that code out and put it into the common with all my other vendor files. And that just happens out of the box, like just with like 2 lines of configuration. So if there's any modules that you have on every single page, it just automatically gets pulled out for you. You don't have to sit there and figure out like what code do I need on this page, what code do I need on that page. And so then if I have a third entry, this one's just logging, this is a little contrived example, but so this would be the 3rd time I've used this logger, right? So then I can come over here to the command line and just run webpack. Actually, I'll do it a little prettier. You can do dash progress. And so you can see how it kind of briefly traversed the reasons. And I think you can even do things like display reasons. Yeah, you can kind of see all the different things that it outputted. So I've got an app that came in at 7K. Is that too small back there? Is that okay? Okay. I've got a captain's log entry, a common entry, and then a Starfleet entry. So let me go show you kind of what that looked like. So I've got my dist folder here. So that common has a bunch of weird looking webpack stuff up top, but it's really not even that much. It's maybe 100 lines of code long. And then that logger util, which started out like this, now looks like this. So this is how it transpiled out of ES6 into ES5. So I can use this in IE9. And Webpack was smart enough to realize that since I use this logger on multiple pages, I'm just going to go ahead and pull that code out and put it into this common thing and just download it just once and not every single time. And then all the code for my captain's log stays in its place, and all the code for my home page stays in its place. So each page has only the JavaScript and styles that it needs. And another thing you can do, I don't have any CSS in here, but that Sass loader that I showed you guys before, you can actually do something like this, which just is like, what are you doing? So if you had a, let's just say, call it a home.scss, my Sass loader would realize that I tried to require, you can also, I think, use imports too. Let me do that, look at it that way, import this. I think you can still do that too. Any way you try to import a module, it'll pass through that loader, and this will do the thing where it will compile the Sass, inline the style sheet. And the reason that I love this is what we're doing right now with my work at Lonely Planet is I've been able to really componentize my app for like the first time ever. So we have this style guide app called Rizzo, and I've got a folder called components, and I've got a header, and I've got a footer, and I've got a navigation, and I've got a book widget, and all these things. And so all the code for my header, all the JavaScript, all the Sass, all of everything lives in that folder, logic, everything. So it's extremely modular. I can just not use it or use it. It's all written in handlebars too. So I can compile it and use it in Ruby, I can compile it in .NET, anything like that. And this weird thing with the CSS is strange at first, but it's so nice because now you know exactly what CSS goes with a specific module. Because kind of in general right now, what most people do is they have, one app.sass or SCSS file, and then it all compiles down into one ginormous style sheet. Whereas with this stuff, I'm able to look in my entry file and determine exactly what CSS is used in that component. So it's very, very, very componentized as well. So it's a huge win. So yeah, that was the Webpack little demo thing for you guys. All right, and that's pretty much it. So yeah, I hope you guys got something out of that. Like I said, it should allow you to use Webpack out of the box, or ES6 out of the box now. And yeah, thank you guys so much.